This particular instructional video gives you information about value in artwork. Now, value of artwork, that's how much money you can get paid for something. But your values are the darks and lights in your artwork. Now, very specifically, darks and lights can be used in monochromatic artwork. Things like pencil shadings. Actually shading with a pencil creates dark areas, and when you leave your paper, that is your light areas. Now you can also use colored pencils, which are blacks, grays, and whites. You can use white medium on a black board. You can do pen and ink, ballpoint, charcoal, paint, even photography and digital art can use these instructions to help make their artwork better. These are some of the things that I look for when I grade a monochromatic artwork. Firstly, every good value drawing or artwork ranges from number 10, the darkest your medium can get, to number 1, the white of your paper. Now that's if your paper is white and if your medium is black. It could be that you are going from number 10, the darkest of your paper, the black of your paper, to number 1, the whitest your medium can get. Regardless, you want that entire range. Now what happens if you're using a reference? Your darkest areas are not super dark. What happens if your number 1s, your whites, are not super white in the reference? Well, as an artist, your job is to improve that. Take the darkest areas of your picture and make them number 10s. Take the lightest area of your picture and make them white. And that will enhance contrast of your artworks and make it better. Now this has a few little areas of number 10s tucked in some of these deeper shadows. And they have kind of some little tiny areas that could be number 1 whites. But the contrast is not super pronounced. Could you make those dark areas darker? Yes. Could you make the brighter areas brighter? Yes. And that can make a more interesting picture. This one has number 10 darks and number 1 whites. And it makes for a more striking and contrasted image. Here's where some people tend to get things a little wrong. Between your 10s and your 1s, there should be an infinite range of grays. You shouldn't be able to count your grays. You shouldn't be able to see where one ends and the next begins. That is called blending. That's what happens whenever your lights and darks go gradually from one to another. Does that happen here with this Bugs Bunny? No, it does not. You can count the grays. There's one gray of the background. There's one gray of his gray fur. There's a slightly different gray for his nose. There's a different one for the inside of his mouth, and so on and so forth. You can count the grays. There is no blending. Oh, but I like drawing cartoons, Miss Fonda. And that's fine. Check this one out. This is still Bugs Bunny, but there are an infinite range of grays. You can see how those lights go gradually to those darks, and it's still a cartoon. You can still draw cartoons with blending. Sometimes it's a little tougher to find the references, but you absolutely can. But Miss Bontemps, this picture is so complicated. I don't want to do anything this hard. You can find simpler ones that still have that blending. It's just a matter of knowing what to look for. So blending is a requirement. Having that infinite range of grays is a requirement. Now look at this one. This was done on black paper with white pencil colors. You have the whitest your pencil can get, the number 1s, to the black of the paper, number 10s. infinite range of grays in between, blending, and this is a gorgeous artwork. Now, you should not use the side of your pencil, your finger, an eraser to create shadows. This is called smudging. And smudging, while an art technique in some situations, is very, very hard to control and should not be used lightly. Now, charcoal requires smudging. We have a special tool for that called tortillons. You have to be careful with smudging, though, to make sure that you are, one, not destroying your infinite range of grays, because smudging tends to create all the grays equally, and two, that you are keeping your smudging where it should be. Smudging is very hard to control and tends to get outside of the artwork, and that's not good. That's just messy, and we do want to keep our artworks neat. Now, if you look at this one, you have a dragon, right? And you can see smudging all on the outside of this dragon. You can see how those grays, while they try to create a little bit of value change, this gray is exactly the same all the way across because of that smudging. But you lose your number ones. The smudging kills your values. Look, they tried to have a highlight right here. Smudging made it not a number one anymore. What could have been a very cool little drawing lost a lot of its quality because of the smudging. Now, if you look at this dragon, number 10 blacks, number 1 whites, infinite range of grays in between, some nice detail, and if you look, smudging was used very carefully to create some of those values. But the number ones are not destroyed, and the smudging does not show anywhere it shouldn't be. That smudging is used carefully. Now, with pen and ink, it is especially important to not smudge, because if you smudge pen and ink, you can't fix it. The only way to fix ink work is to start over. Can I use whiteout? No, you absolutely cannot use whiteout on an ink drawing. That is not good quality. So, especially with ink, you should be super careful to not smudge. Now this one's done with free-flowing ink pens with hatching and stippling and some cross-hatching. This one is done with ballpoint pen, also hatching and cross-hatching, but in a little bit more of a scribble style. If this was smudged anywhere, you would definitely see it and it would not be as good. Also, just like we did in our 9 squares, do not outline your drawings. No matter how beautiful your values, a heavy outline will make things look cartoon. And if you're going for realism, the outline destroys it. Now, if you're drawing Bugs Bunny, outline. That was the point of it. But if you're going for anything that is not cartoony, outlining will cause problems. Because we don't have outlines. Think about it. Look at us. Look at your hand. There's no outline anywhere. If you would take a black marker and draw all the way around your fingers and your hand, it might look like an outline from one point of view, but as soon as you turned your hand, it just looks like you have marks on your hand. The real world does not have outlines. We can tell where things are because the values change. Look at this drawing. You can tell where all the details of this dog are, where all the wrinkles and edges of this dog are, because of the values. You don't see an outline. Now, if you look at this doggy right here, some lovely values done with charcoal. You have your lights and your darks, all beautiful. The only one spot that kind of messed up a little bit was up here with this outlining of the top of the dog. Now, a lot of our mediums are permanent. Shading pencils, charcoal, stain, color pencils, stain, ink. You can't erase any of that. So you should draw your whole picture with a regular pencil first. That way you can get the drawing correct before you go on to your finish work. But you should draw it out first with regular pencil, lightly, so that you can erase. You want to avoid problems like ghost marks, tattooing. Those issues do take away from your artwork and can lower that housekeeping grade. Now if you look at this beautiful stippled elephant, this is done with ink. It is very, very difficult to get all of your proportions and your details correct with ink without having some opportunity to erase. Drawing it out with pencil first helps you make sure that everything's in the right place before you start the ink work, which will not be able to be changed once it's there. This is gorgeous. Now it is better to shade with the direction of the shape of the object. So if you have something curved, shade on a curve. If you have something straight, shade straight. If you have something furry, you can shade in multiple directions to follow the fur. It just depends on what your object is. Now if you look at these spheres, you have 4 examples of a shaded sphere. And there are some issues with some of them. Firstly, in this one, the shading is rough. There are parts that are missing. Things go outside of the actual shape, and there's a heavy outline on the bottom. Now you might have a problem with the texture in here, but I don't really. This goes from dark to light, blends pretty well, and it's just rough. Rough is not so bad, but the messiness of some of the spots make this not as quite as it could be. This pen and ink version has some nice hatching, but unless they're drawing a polka ball, doesn't blend the way that it should to create that spherical look. This area right here causes problems. And the way that the lines follow the shape in most areas, but then change shape drastically, causes problems. If you keep it consistent, it makes it a little nicer. This one, they have some nice dark tints, but then it stops and goes to a next shadow. This does not blend. Even from here to here, this does not blend. From this gray to this gray, the blending is not there. This does not have an infinite range of grays. And right here, there is a monstrous smudge that just takes your attention away from things. And here, they've created a white outline. Looks like they just erased it. It's like, oh, I needed to make sure that I can see the edge of my circle blended into the background. Well, things don't have white outlines. Either make your background shadow lighter so that it does contrast, or just let it blend. Don't worry about it. People will still be able to tell that this is a circle. Now, this last example right here goes from darks to lights. Sorry about the little menu that keeps popping up. I haven't figured out how to get rid of that yet. Follows the direction of the shape with that curve. And I do have a video with some little helpful tips about that. It goes from the dark as the medium can get to the white of the page. And there is a cast shadow down at the bottom. And you can see there's no white outline there, but you can still tell where that sphere ends. That's a good thing. So, of the 4, this is the best shaded example. Now, if you'd like to try portraits for faces and skin, it's actually better to work with one direction of shading for the entire thing. Do a 45 going to the right or a 45 to the left. An angle is better than a vertical or a horizontal. And then just stick with that same angle for all of the skin. Don't try to follow eyes, nose, mouth. There's too many directions, and it's a lot easier to make the face look smooth if you do this little directional trick. And it is an illusion. We're creating the illusion of smoothness, and keeping a consistent angle does help with that. Now I have 3 pictures to show you. This is the first one. This is drawn well. Proportions look good. Everything looks nice. But there are some housekeeping and shading issues. 1. Her thumb's supposed to be going under her hair right here, which is why she looks like she has a short, weird thumb. But because of the lack of values in the hair, it just looks like her thumb is short and strange. There would need to be some darks in this area to show that that finger is tucked under. There's a big area of smudging here in the top. There are not really too many number 10s anywhere in the face. Face shading is pretty good, but this tear in the hand, this folded corner, and this crumpled bit just takes away completely from the artwork, and it's a shame because it could have been such a good artwork. Not having that 10-to-1 and blended rule lowers a grade. Having housekeeping issues like ghost marks, tattooing, tears, creases, and crumples lowers a grade. Has nothing to do with how well you draw. That we're still learning. But you can keep your artworks neat. Now this artwork, this is a rough style, a little bit too much outlining. It's done with a lot of texture. Love it. The blacks and whites and the values in this are great. They really are. However, there's an issue with the drawing. I wonder if you notice what it is. In this drawing, you have center line of his face. You have an angle that his mouth would follow, which should be parallel with the angle that the nose follows. And then parallel with the angle that the eyes follow. Oh my goodness, this eye is flying away. This eye belongs down here, or this eye belongs a little bit up here. The eyes don't line up. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. The most gorgeous shading in the world doesn't do a whole lot of good if the drawing is wrong. Because if you have strange eyes floating on a face, no amount of good shading is going to fix that. You have to have an accurate drawing first. Remember, we have some ways to do that. With faces, you can use face lines. Overall pictures, you can use gridding. There are all kinds of ways that you can help your drawing to be accurate. Just shading is not going to do it though. So you have to make sure your drawing is correct first. Now if you look at this one, this one's actually more simple. It's just eyes and a bit of a nose. Don't have to draw the whole face. But look how beautifully done this is. The drawing is accurate. The composition is interesting. And the shading is beautiful. You have your 10s-to-1s. Everything blends gorgeously. The details are just amazing. This is more effective of an artwork because the drawing and the shading work together. And having that drawing and shading work together is important.